Welcome back to another episode of The Main State of Mind / Capes and Tights, because we're still in the comic book extravaganza here. A couple of weeks of this. So this is a dual podcast again, and then eventually we'll be doing alternating podcasts. But this is both Capes and Tights and The Main State of Mind. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg, and that is Adam Morrisette. We're Zooming right now, but I think we can do
it's weird, man.
Old school,
Yeah.
a little back in the day thing. But welcome to the podcast. You know, we're happy to have you here. And I was listening to a podcast this morning on the way to drop off Nova at daycare, and they always did a Zoom or like over the internet kind of thing for their podcast since they launched it in 2019,
Right.
just because one lives in Austin and one lives in Tennessee. And so they just recently started doing the whole like in-person thing because they've been meeting up for different things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They hadn't seen each other, friends, like they used to work together in like 6 years. And they started a podcast via Zoom or online, I should say. I don't know if they use Zoom or not, which is pretty badass. So it's possible. And I think there's a guy I listen to Off Panel, which is a podcast. There's a guy in Alaska. He is 100% on the internet doing the interviews he does with like comic book people, except for when he goes to cons and things like that. He actually talks to people in person. But he's been able to do a podcast via the internet forever. So I think every once in a while us doing it is not going to be the end of the world, I think.
I think it's pretty crazy how much you can do remotely now. I mean, versus what it would be even if you, that's what today I was setting up, getting my headphones on for the first time. And I was like, man, 10 years ago, I would have been like, I'm not even attempting this.
Yes.
But
now it will be 10 years ago. You'd have to be like, I'll say 10 years ago is not that long ago, but 20 years ago, we'd have had to wait for dial-up to get on.
Oh God. Yeah. Absolutely.
But now, I mean, with the modern technology we have, I can sit here comfortably and, you know, just the scheduling of life right now, it just makes it easier for us to be able to just do this and end it and not be, because, you know, Adam and I both like to talk, which is weird. And we both like to, we both have a lot of same interests, and we don't see each other as often as we used to.
No, we don't.
We see each other more than we did for a little while there, but like, we don't see, so there's a lot of catching up. So even before we started recording this, we were talking for about 15 minutes, and it probably would have been even longer if Adam showed up and then afterwards and so on and so forth. So for scheduling purposes right now, it makes a little more sense to do it via the internet, but we can get this done, do it easily, be fun. I'm excited.
Absolutely.
We're about to talk some comic books, really, and we're talking comic book movies, I should say. We're going to talk how the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't include Fantastic Four or the X-Men, or, you know, Deadpool is included in that but Deadpool's movies has been so successful outside the X-Men lore that I conclude that as a kind of a 1A and, you know, 1B of those. But they're not in it, but let's talk about how we can get them into it as my conversation goes today.
Exactly.
I think that's fun. So first, I guess we'll just start off. So the reason why Fantastic Four and the X-Men are not part of Marvel Cinematic Universe, this goes way back. Adam and I have talked about it a little bit about how like they were failing. Marvel was not about to be around, honestly.
I feel years ago, nobody will believe that today when you tell them, and they're like in the 30s, and I'm like, no, like
when I was born, like
comics.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so they were struggling, and because of that, they were trying to find cash to keep the boat up. And what they did was they sold off the rights to many characters. Yeah. And over the years, a lot of these rights had to do with, like, if you didn't make a movie within 5 years or start production within 5 years, then the rights reverted back to Marvel Enterprises, whatever they called it at the time. So, like, you know, Iron Man, for example, they sold at one point, they sold the option, the rights to someone else. Someone else didn't make a movie with it, and that's why Marvel ended up getting it back. And that's why we had the 2008 Marvel, Marvel film.
That person probably is very unhappy with their decisions.
Yes. Well, it's the thing that I talked about the other day, where it was that like Google got offered Yahoo like $1 million to buy out the Google platform, and they said no. And but those are the kind of like thinking back, hindsight's 2020, obviously.
Of course. Well, God knows it could have been a terrible, terrible movie.
Which they did make, because there was a Captain America movie made in the 90s, which was horrible. There was, and as I talk about how these rights are sold. So back in the day, they sold all these rights to different movies because they weren't able to actually succeed at making movies. The most successful thing was probably the Hulk television show. and then some animated things like the Spider-Man animated shows and stuff like that. But otherwise, it just did not work. So they sold a lot of the rights off to the movies to try to keep the comic book side going. And in 1986, they sold the film rights to and character for the rights of the film and the characters to Constantine Films for Fantastic Four. In 1992, they made a low budget film
they
from
did.
New Horizons Studios, and it was never actually released. It was so bad that they released it, and it's I think sometime I thought I found part of it on YouTube at one point.
Yes.
But it was so bad, which is saying something, really, Adam, right?
It was. It's so bad.
If that movie was so bad they wouldn't release it, that's saying something in the lore of Fantastic Four movies that's that bad compared to the other ones that came out. So it must have been really bad.
Dude, it was like me and my buddies in high school used to make movies when we were just, looking for something to do. And we were like, hey, let's do Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
That was it pretty much.
I think they should just release it now just for fun. Be like, hey.
Oh, absolutely.
Like to make fun of themselves in a sense. Like once they come up with a new one, once the new movie comes out and it's successful, and then you'd be like, haha, look where it all started.
That could be a great multiverse joke too. They end up in this place where they're like, what is this low budget universe?
Why do you look like the cheap version of me? And it's just like Ben Grimm looking at the thing.
It's a guy with like a 4 drawn on his t-shirt.
Johnny Storm just lights a lighter.
Yeah.
Flame on.
lights himself on fire and he's dead.
Yes. That'd be amazing. That's right. And Deadpool's there too, just for happen to be like, oh my God, Deadpool was there.
Yes.
The 2005 film and then 2007 film also were sucky. For some reason, they just couldn't get it around. But Fox was making these films because at some point between 86 and 2005, Fox had obtained the rights to Fantastic Four. They made a 2015 film, which also blew chunks. And they had planned a sequel already, but that was immediately canceled within months after the first one was made.
Yeah.
Or the first 2015 one was made, and they just, they're horrible. I mean, anybody's ever seen them there. They're horrible, but they're worth watching, in my opinion.
Well, they're super fun. I'd like to have them all collected in kind of that legacy thing like Star Wars does, where you can just watch all of the weird old stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that as a comic book fan. I'm wondering out there's probably a good number of people out there who aren't comic book fans that actually like those movies because they have no idea how they relate to the comic books, and that the movies themselves were not that bad. The acting wasn't horrible. There was some story plot lines that I didn't like, but it just definitely didn't live up to what Fantastic Four should be. Because let's be honest, Marvel wouldn't be around if Fantastic Four wasn't created years and years and years ago by Stan Lee. Marvel wouldn't exist. So the worst movies to ever come out of Marvel's movie lore to be the Fantastic Four movies, that's kind of sad, honestly. So
it is. And that's something that if you said is not only the history of it, but man, like when I got reading for this podcast, like it's really bizarre that X-Men and Fantastic Four aren't in it. Like, and I knew that at the time, but now that I go back and think about it, I'm like, how are they not there? Like,
two of the most successful comic book franchises in history are not in the most successful movie franchise in history.
And we're a huge part of the comic story. Like,
yes,
huge,
like massive.
And, Fantastic Four are always a massive part of everything. Like,
yes, and their story's fun. That's the other part about it. It's like you and I could become superheroes tomorrow. Whereas if you think about it, X-Men, if you're not born with a mutant gene, then you can't become an X-Men. You're not a mutant. But Fantastic Four, it's like you and I could be like on a plane, and some sort of thing, a lightning bolt hits our plane, and all of a sudden, I know right now we have powers. That's this cool story about the Fantastic Four. And again, if anybody's listening to this is not a comic book fan, it's Reed Richards as Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm as what used to be called the Invisible Girl. She's now the Invisible Woman. Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm as the Thing. And so those are just in case we talk about the characters later on, so people know who they are in that aspect of it. So you still there?
I am still here. I'm trying to figure out if I'm losing connection or.
It's part of the doing it over the internet. We'll be fine.
It totally is.
I'm explaining a lot and talking a lot, and we'll get into the back and forth thing here in a second. I just want to give everybody like a basis of what's going on.
Sure,
so with an X-Men, 20th Century Fox obtained the rights to X-Men in 1994. They filmed a movie and released it in 2000, and they had two more, X2 and X-Men 3. And then they had spin-offs, 3 Wolverine movies, 4 other X-Men movies, 2 Deadpool movies, which were in its own right were all successful. There were some things that you can pick apart on some of those things, but like in a sense, the non-MCU movie franchises to do well, X-Men is one of those ones that's been able to do really well on that. And so, like I said at the beginning, I put X-Men in one category and Deadpool in another, even though they're technically part of the same character rights, because they're kind of, the movies are different. And then just a couple ideas of Wolverine, Magneto, Professor X, Cyclops, Beast, Deadpool. Those are all some X-Men if you hear us talking about X-Men. But into what we want to talk about now, from Canada now.
You've been living too close to Canada.
Fox purchased by Disney in 2019 for $71 billion, which is insane because Marvel was purchased by Disney in 2008 or 2008 for $4 billion. So, I mean, Fox is obviously a bigger thing, but like, it's funny to think about how much they had to pay to get their characters back, basically.
Absolutely.
It's basically, I mean, they obviously got way more out of it, but they basically, I think Marvel just wanted the characters back. And then they have announced a Fantastic Four movie. And that's the only one. They've said mutants. They haven't been able to say the words mutants at Marvel based around movies in the MCU because the rights were owned by Fox, but now they can actually say it. So they've said in some announcements the word mutants, and they've actually announced that there will be a Fantastic Four movie in the future. No date, no cast, nothing has been announced. So that's really the lineage and how and why we haven't seen X-Men yet. It's because the studio rights weren't in Marvel or at Marvel anymore, Disney. Right. And so other studios had they had other universes. And so this is a conversation people have been having based around comic book movies since 2008, basically. So what's the 2021? So 13 years we've been having this conversation of how would you put them in there? When can we get them? And so on. We got lucky with Spider-Man because eventually Sony gave the rights to let them use it in the MCU. So we've seen Spider-Man. But we're still waiting for that Fantastic Four and X-Men, the first time we ever see one of those characters in the universe built by Kevin Feige at Marvel. So so we're going to talk a little how we think we would want that, and then we'll get into a little bit too of how we think they will do it. I think they're not the same. I think there is some differences there. How personally I would like to see them do it, and how they actually will do it.
Absolutely,
makes a difference. So, but I mean, Adam, before we get into that, I mean, you've seen all those films, right? Basically, you've seen most of the X-Men. I would think that Logan, out of all of those movies, Logan and maybe the 2 Deadpool movies are the best out of all of them.
Absolutely. And honestly, if there was a jumping in point to bring Wolverine in with a multiverse, I would rather it be that Wolverine than the one from the movies. I mean, I'm sure you know what I mean. There's just a difference. The one in Logan felt like Wolverine. Mm-hmm. And the other one did too. But so yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. That Logan would be such a great entry point for Wolverine even. I mean,
and with this whole multiverse thing now, it gives us the opportunity to have this and be like, it was a different universe and they came over and all that stuff too. So it makes this conversation a lot better than it was even a year ago. I think this conversation is completely different a year ago, or even before that, because there was a conversation about the snap for Thanos, that maybe that's how mutants are introduced and all that stuff. So the conversation we can all have now about introducing MCU to Fantastic Four and X-Men are completely different than it was even 18 months ago. So I'd love to jump into that. So
let's do it. I mean, even getting ready today, honestly, I was shocked at how long people have been having this conversation. Like if you look back at YouTube videos, and even up in the ones in the last month, it's wild. Like everybody has a different theory about what's gonna happen.
It's because this is the only thing you can have that conversation for. You can't be like, I wonder when Spawn is going to come into the MCU, because it's not ever going to happen. And it's not owned by the same. But when you have something based on real information, it's conversation we've always had about, like, you know, when is this Stephen King book going to be made into a movie, or when is, like, in Lord of the Rings, you know, when are they going to do a Hobbit movie when they did that and stuff. So, but there's nothing that ever kind of compares to the idea that there's comic book lore that doesn't exist in the Marvel. Like if they had owned all the rights already, we would have already seen a Fantastic Four MCU movie. We would have already seen X-Men. It would have been part of the initial thing. But because this is a unique thing that they didn't, they couldn't touch their own characters, and they had to really tiptoe around it. Because,
well, like you said, you couldn't even allude to the X-Men.
No.
Like
in the mutants, what was it? The enhanced people in the
yes.
Avengers, and so Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. For anybody who wants to get confused a little bit, those are the only two that are both X-Men and Avengers. So they were actually part of the whole deal, was they were allowed to be in both. So there is a version of both X-Men and in the Avengers, and that might be one of the reasons why they killed off Quicksilver so quickly in the Avengers movies, Age of Ultron. But that's just because they didn't want to deal with he's in X-Men, where they hadn't touched Scarlet Witch in X-Men yet. So, but there's a lot more to unpack in the reason, the film rights and all that stuff. But the simpleness is Marvel and Disney did not own the rights to Fantastic Four or X-Men or their related characters and villains.
Yeah. Which I think for anybody that is not fully aware of that, like we just said, that is like huge and mind blowing. So it's really exciting. But I think you think about this for way more than I do with these theories. So like what are your top ideas?
So I think that what Marvel's been able to do in the MCU and just introducing their Avengers type characters before was the solo films. I think that was a cool thing to do in phase one and so on. But I also feel like there's merit to the fact that we've already built this universe over, 10 years, that it's a solo. If you just came up with a solo X-Men film, for an example, or a solo Fantastic Four to introduce these people, it might put the brakes on the universe for a second. Like it might take away from the overall storyline. So I feel like part of these have to be soft reboots in the fact that, back up a little bit. I think they need to be introduced in other movies. So if like Shang-Chi is not going to introduce an X-Men character or a Fantastic Four, like a big X-Men character, we might see these trickle effects of these some characters that are now allowed to use villains or B characters that are X-Men, or some one person that was a Fantastic Four character for one time in movies just because they can do it now. But the major people, I feel like you'll see them in bigger movies, like maybe in Spider-Man Far From Home, you see Wolverine show up for some reason or whatever it may be. I don't think that's the case, but like I'd rather have that be like that, or introduce some of them and in the post-credit scene. So you watch the movie and bam, all of a sudden I know where you scoot over and it's just someone's arm down and the claws come out and you're just like, oh my God. And then you're looking forward to it. But I don't think, the biggest thing I'll start off with by saying is I don't think they should do full reboots to the point where we're explaining who the Fantastic Four is, down to the minute details, who the X-Men are, down to the minute details. If anything, if they wait till the Fantastic Four movie to introduce the Fantastic Four, the very beginning credit scene should be an that
would be cool.
What's that? Homage or whatever homage.
Montage. Yes.
Oh yes.
That's actually
them becoming the character, so you now know a little bit, but that's it. They should not. That would
be really cool too, because they used to do that in movies all the time. Lately, I've been on like an 80s, 90s bender, and it's crazy to me how often. Sorry, that's my fault.
What happened?
I'm still experimenting with my new setup. My alarm went off. Did you hear it at all?
I didn't hear it. I just saw your video blip for a second.
That's all right. I feel bad. But yeah, I just think it's I lost my train of thought, but it's going to be
the 80s, 90s kick, or the kick, the montage.
Every movie I watch, there's like a 2-minute, oh, hey, this terrible thing happened. Like their brother died and then they went out in the wilderness for 3 years and like, boom, here we are right in the moment.
Yep.
And it's really not that jarring. Like it happens and I'm like, okay, good. Let's do something fun.
Mm-hmm. And it could be, they've done these Marvel Legends things that are on Disney Plus. I don't know if you've watched any of those, but it's like a little montage of who these characters are in the MCU before the next movie comes out. So like they did one on Black Widow, and it just showed like clips of them showing who Black Widow is. There's no overlaying voiceover or anything like that. It just shows like the cool clips of Black Widow to kind of give you an idea who she is for the movie. They did it with Peggy Carter before the What If. They did it with like Wanda and Vision before WandaVision, and same thing with Falcon and Winter Soldier, and so on and so forth. But as we get to characters that don't exist, like haven't been created yet, it would be kind of cool how these like half-hour or 15-minute montage kind of thing, but it's not. It's just people talking. Maybe it's you talking to Kevin Feige, maybe you're talking to the upcoming director and stuff like that. That shows like who the characters are to give you an idea. So there's at least some background to these people. But I don't think that like a Fantastic Four movie that starts like the 3 other ones, basically. I mean, I guess the second one wasn't it was a sequel. So like the 2007 film was a sequel, but I think that we've already rebooted it twice. It's the same thing they did with Spider-Man. They did it twice. And in the third film, they kind of were like, oh yeah, I got bit by a radioactive spider. And that's what you did. So, cosmic rays caused us to have, powers.
Yep.
The downside to that is part of Ben Grimm's disdain at times to Mr. Fantastic and Reed Richards is the fact that he turned him into a ugly creature. And so not having that not forcing them, but not having that storyline to base it off of may make that relationship a little bit different, but I don't know. I still think it could happen. X-Men wise, the Fantastic Four one, that's easy. I think you can have Reed Richards show up in Doctor Strange to help with the multiverse. Like, hey, what's the multiverse? He knows all about it. If anybody has read comic books, Reed Richards has a big part to do with multiverses. Reed Richards is the one that found the Marvel zombies and so on. So they're going to do an episode of What If with Marvel zombies. That would be kind of funny if Reed Richards appears first in the What If cartoon. Imagine that.
It's actually one of the people I was reading today was saying the same thing. What if is used as a vessel to kind of prime us for all of these things, and I think that would be really cool.
I honestly, they thought maybe they'd come in WandaVision. They talked about meeting someone that knows a lot about what's going on, and there was a lot of theories out there that it was actually Reed Richards they were going to see. Ended up not turning out to be that, but that would be that idea that you can easily introduce a Fantastic Four character without having him be Mr. Fantastic. It can be Reed Richards the person, Sue Storm the person, Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm
before their powers, which would be brilliant.
And I think they're easier to introduce because they're cosmic. Tomorrow, the Fantastic Four could be introduced, and it would be just a new supergroup. Whereas people have a problem with X-Men and mutants is that all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's just this mutant gene that comes. Is it just all of a sudden, come about? And so that one is a little bit more difficult. I thought it would be easy for them to do the snap. And when everybody came back, a lot of the people that came back had mutated genes because they went away and all that stuff. And that could have been kind of a cool thing. And they still could do that, I think. I think it's close enough that they could say it didn't come to light until 2 years after the snap or whatever it may be.
And that still could be. I mean, it's a pretty good angle to make something that big happen. I was reading one today that's an idea that Charles Xavier's out there, and that Scarlet Witch is a mutant. They just couldn't allude to that before, and he's been kind of erasing all of this from the record because they're so dangerous.
Yeah.
But then he's going to have to come out and reveal them. The problem there seems to be if those people were all around when the Infinity thing was happening, and he was like, no, we'll wait. Yes. That's a problem.
Well, I think, and that's they talked about that on my podcast, Friends from Work podcast. They've talked about how it would be weird for them not to be around to help, but also I know some of this, the snap and all that stuff, and it was a big battle at the Avengers Tower or Avengers Complex. It was in upstate New York, so it's not like it was in LA or New York City where you're would have immediately been filmed with people's video cameras and stuff like that, like the first Avengers movie. That how much do people outside of people living in that area know about what happened? So when someone says, "Oh, the X-Men didn't come," and that would be bad because Professor Xavier's school was in New York. So let's be honest, if they were down the street and didn't know, that's a different story. But the Fantastic Four, for an example, they're in New York City, that maybe they didn't know what was going on, or mutants in general around the other places of the world, and maybe they haven't created the X-Men Professor X school for gifted children. They're still all over the world, and they just don't know what's going on at the time. There's a blip and all that stuff, and maybe that's why they're coming back, and we'll slowly see it introduced. But the cool thing about the Fantastic Four and all of the X-Men, basically, or most of the X-Men, is they don't have secret identities. People know who they are, or they're just regular people that have special powers. And so you can easily, like I said, just weave them into the upcoming movies where Logan shows up in a movie as Logan, and you don't know that he's a mutant yet. And it's not even until the end of the movie or the post-credit scene.
Or just imagine if one of these what we thought were a minor character we've been following through movies and shows forever was a mutant, but they knew they couldn't tell anybody about it at all. And all of a sudden, this character turns out to be like, I don't know, Storm or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be pretty fantastic. But
fantastic.
I don't know. It would be.
But so the other thought was that someone says, so you know how there's the X-Men and then the Inhumans, whereas the Inhumans and the X-Men are very similar on a lot of, like they ran out of, I will say, it's one of those downsides of being a Marvel fan is it did seem like they ran out of storylines to actually Inhumans are basically mutants that they just have to have the Terrigen Mist to get their powers and realize that they're an actual mutant. So my wonder is if it's overplayed, if they do mutants and Inhumans in the MCU, like I know they did the Inhumans show, it was not really connected in a way, like it's not part of this MCU universe.
Yeah.
Is to just kind of like blend the two of them together. Like it might not but it might, old school, purists of Marvel will be like, that's not how it works. But like maybe some sort of something like that happens, that mutants genes are activated because of some sort of global catastrophe.
Honestly, what you just said would be brilliant, which is like, for whatever reason, the first of the Inhumans show up and the mist that they bring it with them. Honestly, that's what, and boom, people start manifesting their powers. But like you said, I like the idea of like, let's just make it all one. That's a lot for people to digest.
And they're basically, like I said, they're basically the same. It's like someone with special powers that got it because of a mutated gene. The mutated gene comes from the Terrigen Mist, whereas, X-Men, you're born with it. And so maybe they mix the two together in a sense that makes it so they're there. A lot of people say, do we need it? Can we just have an X-Men universe that has nothing to do with Marvel or MCU at all and just do the same thing and have parallel universes, parallel movie franchises that are just kick ass being run by Marvel Studios and you don't need them to overlap? I don't like that as much because I want to see. I
don't either, but
I want to see Scarlet Witch hang out with Wolverine. I want to see that. Like
maybe there could be a multiverse crossover.
Yes.
Thing, and then you get to see crossover. That would be fun.
They do them in the Spider-Verse. In the comic books, at least, there is a multiverse still, and that they're they cross over and do things all the time. And I guess the theory is Secret Wars is coming. If anybody's a big fan of the comic book Secret Wars, not the one from the early 80s, late 70s. I don't know when that was. It was sometime years ago. They did another one in 2015. 2015 did another one. And that one featured two worlds. And the beginning of the end of the comic book, issue 1, it's by Jonathan Hickman. So he does these cool like pages that are inside of it. And one of them says the Marvel Universe, 1961 to 2015, the Ultimate Universe, 2000 to 2015. And it's because in 2015 Marvel said they're tired of doing two different universes in comic books, the Ultimate and the regular, and they basically merged the two together and kept certain characters and added certain characters. And I think that's ultimately how they're gonna do it, in my opinion, is that they're talking about the Secret Wars thing where that the X-Men are in their own universe. And it's not going to be the X-Men universe we're used to, because I think that's kind of like, I don't want to see half these characters play these characters. I think Marvel needs to recast these characters. But it could be that Fantastic Four and X-Men are both in their own parallel universes, that during this whole multiverse thing, it comes together, and in the end, they both end up in our universe, and they're now here and they're stuck, and now here we go. And that's how we got mutants and how we get all these other things in the universe. That they've existed. They just weren't in ours.
Funny in a meta way, because I'm thinking like with Loki, we do like, we're like, viewers are being primed for this idea of like, hey, there's all these storylines, but like they were unified. And so you could see where like they break apart, and then the thing becomes, oh God, we've got to unify this again. And then it brings all those disparate parts together.
And some are left out. And honestly, some of the characters that we don't really care about or don't want to write anymore about, maybe they're no longer in our universe anymore. Maybe they get left out. Maybe, I know Hulk, I love Hulk and I want more Hulk, but Marvel doesn't own the full rights to Universal's Hulk. It's Universal owns. That's the one character other than Spider-Man's characters that Marvel has been able to use. But basically any Hulk movie with the Hulk headline, Universal has the rights for distribution. So it's like Marvel loses some money on it. So they haven't done anything really. They've been able to use the character in movies. And so maybe Hulk goes away and they just don't have to worry about it anymore. He's not in our universe anymore. He gets sent away because he does something really bad. And like where he got banished to Planet Hulk in the comic books. Maybe they just send him away and they say, oh, he's in a different universe now. And now you don't have him anymore. So then he doesn't have to be introduced anymore.
And which is brilliant too, because then if down the road they get the rights back at any point, he comes back.
You know, again, Reed Richards has done this with Negative Zone and all this other stuff. Like to travel between universes and so on. So the multiverse will close at some point. I think it will shrink, but I don't think it will ever be like sealed. I think that Mr. Fantastic will have the opportunity to go into other universes and multiverses and so on to get them. But I definitely think it's going to be this world's clashing and we're going to be left over with these pieces and we're going to be introduced to these people who have been around protecting their own universes for years. And now we're just being introduced to it. And now the Avengers and the X-Men and all these other groups, they're gonna be able to see each other and they're gonna be either stuck in the same place, or maybe it is a multiverse that you don't see them all the time, but they cross over here and there and they do, you know, I just came back, you know, Reed Richards you have a big battle to fight. Reed Richards called me over to help fight this battle with you or whatever. And so that's ultimately the probably the plan. And whether or not they destroy it and close it and it's just left with what we had to leave, or we leave it open, I guess we'll see. But the coolest thing I think of the multiverse part of it to me is that everything should be canon. Everything that's existed, including the 1990 Captain America crappy film.
I totally agree. Don't do the Star Wars thing, man. Like,
everything should be canon. We're giving us the opportunity as fans to have that with the multiverse.
What I love is all of the chatter around the new What If series because it's canon, which is fantastic. And even Marvel has said, like, I mean, well, there's a multiverse, so this happened somewhere.
Exactly.
And that's like, that makes it so much more fun because they could bring in Captain Carter at some point. And we would be like, oh yeah, totally. I even saw the origin story already. You don't need to explain that to me.
Yeah, exactly. And and we're not going to spoil anything yet because it's still going on, but episode 2 of What If was amazing. I mean, episode 1 was great.
Yeah.
Episode 2 was like how great episode 1 was. Episode 2 was that much better.
Yeah.
And it was excellent. It was a lot of fun. It was heartwarming. I honestly got a little teary eyed at the end.
Oh, it was great,
the idea that I will say that the only spoiler is that it's a Chadwick Boseman who plays Black Panther's character, and it's his own voice. It's actually Chadwick Boseman's voice, and he's obviously passed away. So this is his last Marvel Cinematic Universe acting was in this show, and it was really good. At the very end, they gave this little like shout out to him and saying, you know, with honor and all that stuff. And I was like, oh my god. But
I know it was great. Like we said, we can't say anything about it, but it was great. I watched it. I actually, for once, this never happens. I saw it before Justin. Yeah, which never happens. And like I said, I can't say anything, but I texted him, and there's a moment that I was like, oh my god, have you seen this?
And then I was like, tomorrow. And I actually did watch it. No, I think we watched it on Sunday. But it was I just loved it, and I think I'll watch it again too, just get like a little play on it too. But it's like I guess all those episodes too are like not like any of the other ones that have come out yet with WandaVision or Loki or Falcon the Winter Soldier, that you can watch an episode and miss 6 of them. It's gonna probably, they do say it's gonna help with the multiverse in the long run, but episode 1 and episode 2 weren't connected. So it's not like if you missed episode 1, then you can't watch episode 2. You can watch both. So, but yeah, the making them all canon, making everything canon. In the long run, I think this is an answer to the history of Marvel films. Yeah, but I don't think you can do it forever. I think you have to close it up in the next 10 years. Like you have to if this is if it's going to be 10 years, maybe this next thing is only 5 years. In the next 5 years, where at some point it does shrink back down to a more simplified universe so that people can understand a little bit better. But like, I think the way I took 15 minutes off the top of this podcast to explain to you why Fantastic Four and X-Men are not in the MCU, I think this would explain, they have been. It's just been in a different universe. And now we're moving on, and now they're part of our universe. And so that would be cool. So I think the canon thing is awesome.
As much as I was talking about how kind of, like in the same Disney universe, Star Wars has kind of eliminated a lot of that backstory. At the same time, they've leaned heavy into like their prequels, and that's kind of the same because there's mixed reviews on those. But I think what ended up happening is brilliant. That doesn't mean we throw them out. That means we let better writers take control and fix the story. I mean,
And so the question, I guess the biggest one is, we talked about a little bit, is will the mutants and the Fantastic Four make the MCU better, or will it make it worse, or will it just be status quo, I guess, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
We always talk about, I think with Kevin Feige in charge of it, I think he understands the gravity of the multiverse moment, which is you use it to fix everything you want to fix and get where you want to be. And then we don't talk about it after this is over, because it's too much of a, Deus Ex Machina there. And so on that, I think that's great. They'll find a way. And I really just keep thinking X-Men have always been such an allegory for minorities and civil rights in the United States. And I really just, whether it wasn't intentional, it's getting right. It's like the timing now for X-Men to come out and be done right, because people are watching Disney Plus and they are watching Marvel and they are watching X-Men. And so if they take that chance to say, look, we're just talking about mutants, but this is what's happening to people, dude, all the time, people will see that. So I think that could be exciting. So to answer, yes, they could bring a lot to it. It could dilute it up. If they don't do something meaningful like that, it could really make it too much.
But I guess also we've had 10 years. So we've already lost Iron Man, right? He's no longer a character. Or he's a character, but he's no longer alive. So he's no longer part of him. He's not going to be a movie, is anything like that. We've lost Scarlet Witch, not Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, who's no longer, again, Hawkeye is basically retired. There's going to be a Hawkeye show, but like there's going to be a new, younger Hawkeye, and so on and so forth. My point is, by saying this, is that there's a shift that we can make, that we could also focus the next 10 years a little bit on what we already have getting released with Shang-Chi, again, new introduced character, the Eternals, all new introduced characters. So like as we get further along, we can start pushing some of these older characters, the Avengers, away. Not that they're going to be gone, but that the next big phase is just focusing on the X-Men and Fantastic Four, that we don't actually need to have all of them on the screen at the same time. Let's take a pause. Let's not do an Avengers film for years and years and years and years down the road, so that we actually can have an opportunity to focus on the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and so on. So I think maybe 3 or 4 years from now, there's X-Men style films like we did for the like a Magneto film and a Wolverine film, and then an X-Men film that was like the Avengers, that has all of them getting together and doing something as the X-Men team. But we didn't talk about, it kind of alluded to when you talked about Disney Plus, is this possible they do a freaking Magneto show on Disney Plus, it's Professor X show, to kind of give you an idea of background on who these are, a Fantastic Four show that gives you like a Reed Richards and Stu Storm story, or something along those lines that actually happens before the actual movie gets out, because it is still a money-making effort for them. And to get people to sign up for Disney Plus, it may be one of those things where they introduce some of these characters on Disney Plus first, like they have for some of these characters moving forward.
And I think we both said too, would you really consider how quickly everything has changed from like, say, 10 years ago with Marvel, and like now it's, Disney Plus, it's hard to, that really changes the game in such a huge way, because 10 years ago, you were really banking that people were going to watch, or even longer, they were going to watch those early movies. They were going to care enough to realize that these things were getting tied together, and it worked. But now, man, like you said, to be able to be like, hey, we're doing a 5-part series. It's the backstory of this person. It's awesome. And that's a totally different thing.
And I think we'll have some throwback stuff like we did with the whole Black Widow, the movie, how it kind of like threw it back to, it wasn't part of the thing. Maybe you'll see an X-Men movie get out there, but a Professor X and Magneto show that goes back in time and says, this is how they became friends at one point, and this is the falling out, and how Magneto became a villain, and so on and so forth. But that comes out in conjunction or at the same time or before, or even after some sort of X-Men film comes out, just so we're like, oh, I wonder the backstory on, a prequel to the X-Men actually existing.
Which would honestly be brilliant with Magneto and Xavier, because it's probably time to update the Holocaust World War II background story. It's awesome, but it's losing its current cultural weight. And so if they could turn this into something more related to modern racial issues, that would be awesome.
And that's what happened. That's what they did with Iron Man. Iron Man, the comic books, it was the idea behind how he became Iron Man was roughly the same, but where he was in the time frame and how he became Iron Man was different. So like it was in Asian, it was in China that he actually became the Iron Man in the comic books, whereas in the TV show he was in Afghanistan or the Middle East. So it's like it's that aspect of modernizing it, so it makes it more noticeable to younger viewers. Now it makes it more relatable, and that aspect of it too. So I guess the last thing, I guess so basically we're saying is that, first of all, I guess Adam and I are both saying is, however the hell they do it, it's going to be amazing. Kevin Feige's in control. The second thing is that I think we're both in conjunction on this, about both agreement on this, about how like it should be a softer, like weave them in. But I also wouldn't be upset if the Fantastic Four was the first time that we saw them all, just as long as they don't do an actual reboot and don't show us everything. I'll be happy. I'm sure they're going to do it well. I'm sure it's going to do amazing. To close and finish things up for the last couple minutes, I wanted to see a little bit about what's going on new in Marvel. And one of the things I'd like to connect it to is the last remaining big franchise that's not part of the MCU is Sony or Spider-Man. So that movie comes out in December. They're hopefully going to be dropping a trailer. I mean, we're recording this on Monday to release on Wednesday. Still a possibility that sometime this week we get a trailer for Spider-Man.
Yes.
But Spider-Man No Way Home. And so Spider-Man characters are still owned by Sony because they sold them years ago. And that includes Spider-Man, Venom, Carnage, Morbius, all those other movies that are coming out, Kraven the Hunter. Those are all movies that are on the horizon to come out. And there was a talk online that Marvel and Disney might be trying to buy Sony, which is I read the article. I was like, I read the headline. I'm like, oh my God, yes, please. Sony's not for sale. First of all. Second of all, I don't know if the trade commissions, they would let them, it would be monopoly on that because of that. I guess they could buy it with the agreement that they have to sell off, like, like how that sometimes happens, like a business gets to buy the whole corporation, but then it's only allowed to go through the sale if you already find a buyer for this portion of this. So they may say, you're allowed to buy this, but you have to sell off this part. Disney just spent 2 years ago $71 billion to buy Fox. The rumored estimated value of Sony is $30 billion. And Sony's worth their market cap is about $500 billion. So that's a lot of money to put into the future for something. And so there's theories out there that's like, that's not possible. Disney can't buy Sony.
The size of it, I'm just thinking then they have PlayStation. I mean, oh my God, which I could see the angle there.
but in the same sense, they may say
the Spider-Man game.
Yes. They may say, Disney, you're allowed to buy Sony for $30 billion, but you have to sell off the video game portion of it to someone else.
Yes.
But in that selling off to someone else, Marvel and Sony and Disney get together and say, oh, cool, we want the rights though to Spider-Man back, like that kind of thing, to make it in our own video games too, not just on PlayStation. So there's that aspect of it too. The last thing was they just came to an agreement with Disney and with Netflix to do pay one and pay two releases of their films. So like when Spider-Man No Way Home comes out, it goes into the theaters first. After it's ready to go out of the theaters, it goes into Netflix. When the Netflix gets it, and then when it's to the next point when Netflix is done with their run with it, then it ends up on Disney Plus. And Marvel or Disney just paid millions and millions and millions of dollars to Sony to that. And the rights still go to Netflix. So if Sony was purchased by Disney, they still wouldn't be able to put No Way Home on Disney Plus until after Netflix. So it's like, that's another thing where it's like this whole thing. If Disney was planning on buying this is not something that you and I are like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go buy a TV today. This is not the same thing. It's when you buy a $30 billion company, it's like years in the making. So if Sony was for sale and Disney was about to buy them, they wouldn't have made these deals. They would have brought them in the first place. So I don't think it's happening. And they have a good relationship right now. They just agreed to having Spider-Man allow him in Fantastic or Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. And I know the Sony films are not bad. Like I liked Venom.
They're not.
Looking forward to Venom 2, and I'm looking forward to Morbius. And I guess they're making a Kraven the Hunter movie, which would be awesome. So I'm not sad about that. I also think it'd be kind of cool if they made it part of the multiverse, that it does exist. All those like Spider-Man actually is in the wrong multiverse. Like he's actually supposed to be in a different one, and he ends up in this one somehow. But
which I think before we're getting into, we have one person we haven't talked about is Deadpool.
Oh yeah, good point.
I just thought of it when you said something, and I was like, oh man, I haven't even, because talk about something that could be so fun. I was reading today people's theories about Deadpool entering the Marvel universe, and oh my gosh,
Well, first,
it could be
first
amazing.
MCU movie that would be rated R, because you
Yeah.
cannot do a Deadpool justice without doing it. And
not at
so
all.
that would be great. I'm looking forward to that. I'd love to see Deadpool Wolverine movie. Honestly, it'd be awesome to see like there was a whole run of Deadpool and Spider-Man movie or comic books. That would be cool to see as well.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so Ryan Reynolds is the best actor to play Deadpool. So that's the only person, honestly, that's in the Fantastic Four or X-Men universes that I would like to be continuing on as that character. Everybody else scrap and recast. Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool is perfect, and there's no reason not to.
I feel like in some way his existence as that character already unifies everything in this like unofficial way, which I love. And that's why I was just thinking, whether it's in Multiverse of Madness or No Way Home or whatever, it would be, I don't know if it's even but it'd be awesome to just see him start popping in.
Yes.
Even in the
background, just walks by in the background.
Well, I think that would be the most brilliant, is like a bus, like a taxi goes by and he's like, hi, and it just drives by and you're like,
the theory I've always had was have him take over for Stan Lee as all the cameos, is that Deadpool's just driving the bus for some reason. Like, why the hell is Deadpool driving the bus? That would be great. But yeah, Deadpool, I mean, what I would also love to see in this multiverse thing is there's a whole series of comic books called Deadpool Destroys the Marvel Universe. And with the multiverse and the what if thing, it'd be a cool show. I would love to animate it. It would be fun to just do it animated like they do it now, but they couldn't put it on Disney Plus. It'd have to be on Hulu because of the ratings and stuff like that. But do a thing where it's like a 6-episode thing where Deadpool just goes around and kills a bunch of Marvel characters and just destroys the universe. Yeah. And it's an alternate universe, but it's just like Deadpool just shows up and was like, oh, cool, Professor X, bang, and just kills him.
Right, which would fit in so well with all the Loki stuff going on. I mean, just he shows up in some random Marvel universes and just slaughters everybody.
And just like, okay, we just don't want the universe anymore. It's like he kills himself in another universe, or like, you know, takes the Infinity Gauntlet and snaps his own fingers and does his own stuff with it.
Yes, exactly.
And that would be awesome. I think it'd be great. And if Ryan Reynolds, would sign up to do the voiceover, because I think it'd have to be animated to do something like that. But yeah, so Deadpool would be great. I think that any way they bring Deadpool is gonna be fine. There's already talk about Deadpool 3 and all that stuff too. It technically is Deadpool 3, but it's kind of cool if it goes into the Marvel Cinematic Universe not to call it Deadpool 3, call it Deadpool something like they did with No Way Home, and so that it's like it shows that it's a fresh start, but not really.
Yes.
And it would be cool to use a lot of characters they're never going to use, like they did in the Deadpool 2 with all those characters that basically die. Do the same thing in MCU with a lot of the characters that Deadpool hadn't been able to interact with, but now can, and Marvel's never going to use, which would be unbelievable in that aspect.
I just feel like Deadpool is so ridiculous, and that's why I love the character. But I feel like Deadpool could show up in the background of a scene in Star Wars on Disney, and you wouldn't even bat an eye, because we expect Deadpool to be in weird places. Like
he breaks the fourth wall. Is the fourth wall? Yeah, the fourth wall.
The fourth wall, yeah, absolutely.
I guess what else is going on? We're talking about Marvel. I guess they are casting the Fantastic Four movie now, which would be cool, because I think very rarely in Marvel so far have they cast a movie and not have the character show up in a different movie. The main characters show up in a different movie. So we might see some of that coming out here pretty soon, which would be really badass. Yeah, and that's about it for Marvel. I mean, we're waiting for the Sony trailer for No Way Home. That's a big one. It's the longest or the closest to the movie release in Marvel Cinematic Universe history for a trailer not to be released yet. So the only other one that was closer to the actual release was the original Incredible Hulk, but I think they were also waiting for, because it came out in the same year that same year that Iron Man came out with. So I think they were waiting for Iron Man to be like the hype of Iron Man to be down or over before they introduced the Incredible Hulk trailer, so that you wouldn't go see the movie in Iron Man first.
That's for sure.
But it's the closest now to the actual movie that we haven't had a trailer yet, and so they're going to break the internet for that trailer. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not looking forward to it as much as some of these people on the internet were like, "Where's the trailer?" I'm like, that's cool. I'm looking forward to it. Like, I'm not like that. I mean, this is the third Spider-Man movie. I'm more excited for Shang-Chi or the Eternals because it's new characters.
Oh yeah.
But I guess some people want to know what happens to Spider-Man, because they at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, the whole he's Peter Parker. So
and it's just Spider-Man. It's like, I mean, you can X-Men, Avengers, we love them. Like, I don't know, there's something, everybody just loves Spider-Man.
Yes.
Like, because I do. Like, if you were to say favorite superhero, I'd have to be like, I guess Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. And that's the weird thing again, too. If you think back on it, before the Sony Marvel deal for letting Spider-Man be in there, the top 3 ever comic book characters in like Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Spider-Man are all not owned by, until 2019, they were not owned by Marvel. It's like,
I know.
And they made an MC universe off of the characters that were not their top 3. Like they made an entire universe off of
like
lower.
Incredibly well. I mean, that's like we've talked about that before. Like, I full disclosure, like when I saw the first trailers for Iron Man, I was like, no way, dude. I was like, the very fact that you're starting with Iron Man tells me you're not serious, and I'm not in. And then I watched it, and now here we are.
I watched it 4 times in the theaters. After watching it for the first time, because I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And every time I go to watch it, and so, you know, I'm looking towards the future of this show on Capes and Tights. I'm putting together a pretty extensive long term. I mean, I think I have topics I want to talk to all the way up until 2023. But part of the things I want to do is I want to do a little bit more movie talk, movie review. I don't want to get to be solely that. I think they're going to need some comic book other things, some toy things, some collectibles that we want to talk about, some Vive stuff. I mean, they're doing comic books here pretty soon, aren't they? They're actually releasing some books.
They are.
And so those are the kind of things I want to talk about. But one of the things I was thinking about is like you and I rewatching the MCU stuff on our own leisure, and then coming to writing notes down and coming down and doing things. So, you know, obviously there's no new Iron Man films, but instead of doing one on Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, is like, we're doing one on the Iron Man films. And we talk about how all of them, you know, we can rate each one. We can be like, okay, the best one is Iron Man or whatever. And we can talk about that, but like do an episode that's just talking about those films, what we liked, what we didn't like, and all that stuff. But then as we get closer to some of these movies coming out, like Ant-Man, when Ant-Man 3 comes out, it's like we do an episode that's like right after Ant-Man 3 comes out. And then say we watch, this is the Ant-Man one. So we talk about the first 2 films and the new film instead of just doing one specifically on the new film. And then we'll do other
I love that. We can do retrospectives.
Yes.
Is that the fancy word for it?
One of the things that we talked about too is we could be different than other comic book related podcasts where we could like, we're going to do a review of the movie after it comes out on Disney Plus. So like people can do their own thing about the theater and stuff like that. We're going to give you our reviews of what it's like to watch it in your own home. Not that saying that we're not going to go see them in the theaters when they come out. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But I'm just thinking like when, you know, I had put on the tentative schedule to say, oh, we'll review Shang-Chi, for an example, 45 days after it comes out in the theaters, because Adam and I will watch it in our own homes, enjoy it, and then we'll explain to you why we liked it and what there are benefits of watching in your own home. Because I think enough people out there talk about going to theaters. So
exactly, and that'll be fun too, because we'll be doing a review after we've had, you know, a month to think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And not that, I mean, everybody's excited the next day, but after a month, you realize, man, I didn't notice that. Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah, I think that's great.
And also, man, it gives us opportunities we could spoil it. Because here's the deal: if 45 days after a movie comes out, you can spoil it. If you and I go see it opening night and we review it that weekend to release it on Wednesday, you don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Nope.
And you might have people miss it. No. So I thought if we do it 45 days after it comes out, or whatever the gap between it in the theaters and on Disney Plus, that gives people plenty of time to either go and see it in the theaters or the weekend it comes out to see it. Then we can just spoil the hell out of it and be like, okay, that's what.
And we can have a general disclaimer that is, if we talk about a new Marvel movie, we will not talk about it until 45 days after it's out. So, but if we're going to talk about it, it's spoilers.
Yes, we're not. I don't want to dance around it. I think you're going to have to talk about it. We're not great movie reviewers in the first place, I don't think. So we're going to have to talk about it to talk about it. So I think that's the way we're going to have to do it. But we're also going to do, I think, and Adam's pretty pumped about it, coming up here pretty soon too. In September, we're going to do it. We're going to watch all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original 3, and talk about them as well. And I think there's a lot of those series that I think comic book related that'd be kind of fun to watch and talk about and get other people's input.
Watching the TMNT movies makes me a little giddy. I've been telling Annie about it. She's very excited.
Yes. So I think the same thing. Taylor and I are going to watch it together, and we're going to talk about, like, she might have some input that I'll be able to write down and say, this is what Taylor thought. And so she's not a huge fan. And she watched them before. So this will be the second time for her to watch them. But I think they're fun and stuff. So I think I'm excited.
When we get our Slack going, we need to have a channel for Taylor and Annie where they can do like a curmudgeon's corner and be like, no, that was a dumb show.
Which is funny because like we both listen to the Friends from Work podcast, and one of the wives on the show, the 2 hosts' wives, are one of their favorite movies is Doctor Strange in the MCU, and one of Taylor's least favorite movies in the MCU is Doctor Strange. So it's like, interesting. We'll have a little opposite reactions there from those things, but I'm excited. So I mean, this is coming out on the 25th. So we got a couple more weeks till Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings comes out.
Yep.
That'll be cool. New characters introduced. What I will say before we kind of close things up too is, so the only spoiler I'm going to give you, and this is a spoiler if you don't want to listen to this you can pause or mute it for a couple of seconds. Is the heck was that? Interesting.
You got a ghost in the studio?
I guess so. Yeah. The Howard the Duck shows up in this latest What If show, which is unbelievable. You know, Howard the Duck has been in the MCU before because they had that small like snippet of a scene in a Guardians movie, I believe, where it shows him drinking outside. There's another scene, I believe, where he's in one of the boxes for the Collector.
Yeah.
Well, he's in the Collector 1 for this show and 2, so that's all I'm going to say. What happens with Howard the Duck? But I went online that was a Saturday night and looked up some stuff, and I just see how my comic books are doing value wise. My first appearance of Howard the Duck doubled in value.
I bet it did
because of a small snippet of animated Howard the Duck in a What If TV show, and I was just like, okay, here we go. Ready? A Howard the Duck and Deadpool show.
Oh, that's what it would be. Fantastic.
And guess what? With the multiverse, it's George Lucas's Howard the Duck film from the 80s canon now.
Oh my God. It couldn't be any more perfect that it is that. I've thought about that before. Yeah, but no, I think Deadpool, Howard the Duck would be great. Still in my Kevin Feige's listening, my our big idea, Jar being Herald of Galactus.
Yep.
That's how we should bring those two universe. And that's it. Never do anything else, but just have Jar Jar Binks go away and find planets for Galactus.
Well, that was the funny thing. Is I'm watching Comic Book Men, the TV show on AMC. It was out for 7 years. It's Kevin Smith's comic book shop in New Jersey, Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. And they talk on the show. It's like a Pawn Stars for comic book related things. It's one of my favorite shows. And I've watched it 3 or 4 times. It's stupid because it's the same thing. You know what they're buying the prices for because obviously you've seen it and so on. Sure. But they were talking about how they never released, George Lucas has never put on tape or DVD or digital the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah.
But yet he still stands by Jar Jar Binks.
Yep.
What the hell? You won't release it because you don't like it.
And you look at the stuff that's now canon, that's the early or 70s cartoons, but you're not going to give us the holiday special. Have you seen The Faithful Wookiee? It's the goofiest thing you'll ever see in your life.
And it's like, and they said they're like, he's screwed around with the original trilogy too. He's added things and subtracted things and done things. Screw with it. Make the holiday special different than it was in the first place. Work on it, then release it. But why won't you release it? You won't release the holiday special, yet you'll stand by Jar Jar Binks. No idea how that works. But so, whatever, man. He's swimming in a bath of money. I guess he can do what he wants.
It's true. I feel like Jar Jar Binks has signaled that we've hit rock bottom.
Yes.
With content.
Yes. It's bad. But quick sip of coffee here so that's pretty cool. So I'm excited. So we know this is coming. Like there's going to be something in the horizon. We obviously know there's a Fantastic Four movie coming out. The theory is 2023-ish, maybe end of 2022, beginning of 2023 is the idea. Maybe later into 2023 with the pandemic kind of screwing some plans up. But we will see a Fantastic Four movie, which looks pretty cool. The still image they have of just the logo, it's just like 4 and like these lights already looks better than anything that's come out for Fantastic Four in the movies anyway. So there's just that one black image with the 4 on it in blue and it says Marvel Studios. That's alone is the best thing I've seen.
It's huge.
Fantastic Four on the screen. So we're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing Wolverine again. I'm looking forward to Professor X again. What I will say is why I'm excited for them to do a kind of a reboot, but not fully introduce the characters and so on, is that I want Professor X in a wheelchair, like the cartoon, like the original films. I want to see Cyclops. I want to see Magneto. I want to see Beast. I want to see Wolverine. If you do it as the characters that are already created in a different thing, you lose some of the longevity of how long you can use Professor X and so on. So I want this to be like Professor X was created now, so you can use not younger, but like not super old Professor X, so you have years to use him. Whereas if they were to use him from the other movies, then you have only a finite number of years to use him. Right.
Like you said, you could get somebody young at first and he's not in a wheelchair till later. So you get a different kind of a more active Professor X, and that'd be kind of fun too.
Yeah, and maybe you find out why he's in a wheelchair. Like that's part of the whole storyline, and that's all. So looking forward to it. Anything else you want to add about these 2 movies or things coming out or anything else you want to add about Marvel?
I don't think so. I think a lot of exciting stuff going on, getting ready to go into Bangor Comic-Con. So that's fun. We'll have no shortage of excitement there from everybody, probably.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so much stuff getting ready to happen.
I'm excited. I think we have talked a lot of Marvel stuff, but I think next week we're also going to talk some more. And that is going to be fun. And I forget what we were going to talk about next week. Do you remember what we were going to talk about next week?
Next week is, yes, I do. I got it right here. It is.
Oh, yes. Adam's going to take on the idea and the mantle of that DC side. And I'm going to take the Marvel side. We're going to argue.
Which will be fun. I actually, which is funny too, because I just like randomly brought all my childhood comic books back home. So a lot of DC in there. So I'm going to dig in the next week and try to rediscover my passion for DC.
And
which, as you said, I love DC comics. I always have, but I'm like, in the later years, it's all Marvel.
Yeah, and it's truth, and I do like there's some storylines and some things that I do like about DC, but I think it's fun to have that banter back and forth on what is going on and why one's better than the other or not better than the other, or maybe we come to the end like the greatest battle of the century, whatever it was, comic books, like things just end in a tie because they can't actually say that one's better than the other. But in the end, I have always will have a passion for Marvel over DC. And that's why as people grow and listen to this podcast and add it and join us week after week with the Marvel stuff and the comic book stuff, is you'll understand that a lot of it's going to be centered around Marvel. Because that's the passion and that's what I have and that's what I love. So, but we'll do some things. I have some other things in here for DC stuff. So when new DC movie comes out, we'll talk about that. But some of those ones, if we do, we might end up doing where they combined, where it's like reviewing the Aquaman movie and the new Flash movie together. Because I don't know if I'd be able to talk an entire episode on Aquaman or Flash for sure.
Oh, absolutely. That's another I have not seen. No. The recent DC years. So yeah, I got to catch up and I can't imagine doing a whole episode about each one. And I guess that's why we all love Marvel right now.
Yeah.
So
exactly. But
there you go.
So I'm looking forward. What If is on TV right now too. So keep up on that. It's fun. We'll do a maybe a little synopsis in part of another episode. We'll just talk about how good What If was. I don't think we need to do a full reviewing TV shows is hard because it's overtime and I don't want to have to rewatch them all over again to get a review done. So yeah, you can follow Capes and Tights at Capes and Tights Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, at The Main State of Mind on YouTube and Apple and Spotify, as well as The Main State of Mind on Facebook and Instagram. Capesandtights.com, themainstateofmind.com. Hopefully in the future, I think there's one or two more episodes where this is kind of like all together. In the future, we'll have an exit saying just to follow one or the other. But right now, we'd love you to follow both. And we'll get back into main specific podcasts in the future. We're just right now in this whole comic book thing, getting ready for Bangor Comic-Con in October, as well as just getting the introducing of the Capes and Tights podcast as well. So yeah, till next week, I'm good.
I'm good too. I'm gonna go read some DC comics and get back in the zone.
Not me.
Okay, I'll do that for you.
But so next week on Capes and Tights, we'll talk Marvel versus DC. So make sure you check that out as well. And check out all of our old podcasts too. I mean, we've had a couple good ones that have been coming out over the past few weeks on some comic book related topics, as well as look forward to the future. Last week was comic book movies. So if you want to like comic book movie idea, we talked a little bit about that last week too with Josh Moulton from Queen City Cinema Club. So, hey man, appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
As always, you know it.
See ya.
See you, man.